Hey folks, so I want to take you through one of our biggest case studies, and that is tropical rainforests, or TRF. And we're going to have a look at specifically the Amazon rainforest. Now I know there's others that we can study, but for this one I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can, but this one's going to hopefully cover everything you need to know really in one infographic. Okay, so the first thing we just need to look at very, very quickly, if we imagine this is the Earth, this little circle, the reason they're called tropical rainforests is you have the equator that wraps its way around the planet, and then either side of the equator you've got the tropics, the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And it's between those two that we find tropical rainforests. And generally speaking, they have an average temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. And that's what we need. We need a high temperature, and we also need that daily rainfall, which comes from and is linked to that temperature. If you're thinking about your global air circulation model, which you might be, it's the Hadley cell. Okay, and we know in the Hadley cell there is rising air, and it's that rising warm air that then cools down, condensates, and we get that daily rainfall, often around lunchtime. And in terms of rainfall, it's 2,500 millimetres per year on average. So considerably more, you'll note, than anything we experience here in the UK. All right, so there's just a bit of background about where we find them and what sort of conditions. Now I want to take you through, to start with, the kind of vegetation that you might expect to see there. And to do that, I'm actually going to draw, let's make sure I've got this straight, a really big tree. There we go. With large buttress roots. And this isn't obviously a real tree, but just one branch. There we go. And there we go. Right. Really not the best example of a tree, but it's going to help us understand a little bit more. Okay, so there's 4 levels in the rainforest. Right, so we're going to draw a line for the first one, which is the forest floor. This is sometimes called the shrub layer. There is only 2% sunlight right down here. So in fact, if we just draw the sun on, right, sun up there, I'll just remind us what we're thinking about. So right down here, there's very, very little sunlight. So we have the forest floor. We then have this layer called the under canopy. Okay, and this is slightly brighter. There's a bit more sunlight coming through, and certainly the rain coming through. But it's this area that basically exists underneath the main foliage, the main canopy, the main amount of leaves, really. Okay, so we have this under canopy. Then, as you can imagine, what comes next is the canopy. And if you're looking down on the rainforest from above, you will actually see this. It looks like a blanket of trees. It's like you can't imagine how any sunlight could actually penetrate that. The canopy is a really dense layer of vegetation. But then there's this other level, which is the emergent layer. And this layer, I'm just going to put an arrow going up, it can be over 40 metres high, sometimes much more than that. So I'll just put over 40 metres high. And then, so when you are looking down on the rainforest, imagine like a drone shot, you would see the odd tree just dotted about here, there and wherever that's significantly higher than the canopy layer. Okay, let's talk about some of the adaptations. Now you'll notice my tree didn't go straight down, it's come out. And that's because trees that are in the rainforest, these very, very tall emergent trees, they need a solid base because they don't want to fall over. So these are called, just wondering how to do that. I'll just put it here. Buttress roots. Okay, they're very wide, very stable, and they anchor the tree. And part of the reason that they are needed is because the roots of these really large trees, they don't go deep down into the ground. They spread out, and they don't go deep down because the soil is actually quite infertile, meaning it doesn't have loads of nutrients, and there's no need for those roots to go down. They're getting daily rainfall. The rainfall's hitting them here. They don't need to dig for water. And there's no point going into infertile soil. And the reason it's infertile is because of that daily rainfall. It's being leached of all its nutrients. So that's why the roots are quite shallow. Now, what's next? Let's have a look at some of the things that live in the rainforest. So if you draw this sort of curly-whirly line up here, this is a vine. Okay, lots of vines live in the rainforest. The one we're thinking of is a liana. I actually had a student once called Liana. I used to love teaching this when she was in the lesson. So liana, it's a vine, think Tarzan and Jane really, flying through the jungle, but it climbs its way up the trees, using the trees for support because they are tall and they are straight. They are going for one thing and one thing only. That's sunlight, yeah. So the lianas use that. They're going for the sun too, and they just climb their way up the tree. They're not helping the tree. The tree doesn't need them. They're using the tree. And another thing that uses the tree doesn't want, just try and draw it like this. That's supposed to be like a bit of a growth, really. Might be another one over here. Like a hairy armpit, isn't it? It's a parasitic plant. It's called an epiphyte, and it's spelt a bit strangely, a phyte like that. But if you remember, it's a parasitic plant, which means this plant isn't just leaning on the tree for support, it's actively feeding off the tree. Its roots are into the bark and it is using the tree. It's landed there maybe as a seedling and it is now growing on the tree. So it's not in any way helpful, but without the tree, it couldn't live there. Now, the tree itself, the leaves, if I just do an example of the leaves. So this is, a leaf. Imagine that is on the tree. We'll just draw the line on the leaf like that. The important bit isn't the size of the leaves or anything else. The important bit is that bit there. And that is called a drip tip. And that's because off the leaf drips water. And so when that heavy rain comes, which it comes, daily in the rainforest, the leaves don't collect the water and suffer. Because think, all that weight of the water could actually harm the leaves. It could break the leaves. It could break branches if the branch became too heavy, too wet. But not only that, it's very warm, it's very humid in the rainforest. And having water that's collected on a leaf could actually cause the leaf to become a bit kind of like almost mouldy. Bacteria will build up. And then suddenly that leaf, it can't photosynthesize in the same way as it needs to collect that energy from the sun. So it's really sensible that when the water collects, the drip bit of the leaf just lets the water drip off and it will fall to the ground. And the other really cool thing about these leaves is they don't fall in autumn. There's no seasons in the rainforest. It's the same, well, there's a wet season for 6 months and a slightly drier season for another 6 months. But the leaves actually fall, I'm just going to draw a line like this, they fall all year round. And that's a good thing because when those leaves fall, I'm just going to draw another one here. Okay, they provide something called leaf litter, and it builds up on the forest floor, and because it's so warm, remember average 27 degrees, it actually decomposes really quickly. So we get that rapid decomposing due to the humidity. And when it's decomposing, then the nitrogen and other things that are in the leaf can get soaked back up by those wonderful buttress roots, and it will essentially feed the tree again and feed other things. Remember though that some of those nutrients are going to get washed away by the daily rainfall. Washed out by rainfall. Okay, so if you can talk confidently in an exam question about epiphytes, lianas, the fact that leaves drop all year, the buttress roots, the emergent layer, you're going to do really well. But that's your vegetation. Let's not forget that animals live in the rainforest, and they're actually some of the most interesting. Now the one we're going to focus on, we've got two actually, sorry, is the howler monkey and the three-toed sloth. So, I'm really bad at these. We'll have a go. So, the howler monkey, just going to give it a little monkey face. That's the worst ever. There we go. Little body, and then long limbs. Awful, I know. There we go. There's our little monkey. And he's called Howler Monkey. Now there's other monkeys, obviously, that live in the Amazon rainforest, but he can be our example. And when you're thinking about him, the things you want to mention are long limbs. Okay, he's got long arms and legs. Which means that he can easily move around the forest. Long limbs for easy movement across the canopy layer. That's the main place that he exists. And the other thing, I'm just going to draw an arrow, this tail, okay, it's prehensile. And prehensile essentially means it's like a fifth limb. It can grip like a hand. It's got muscles in it. In fact, he can hold his whole weight on his tail. So prehensile tail for gripping branches. Because let's face it, if he falls 40 meters, he's dead. So they need these adaptations in order to survive in the rainforest. Okay, so the other one we're going to do, and I apologise, it's probably even worse. There we go. It's something called a three-toed sloth, and I'm trying to draw that now. I'm really bad at a sloth, but there we go. So a three-toed sloth, it's a creature, very slow-moving creature. Moves incredibly slowly through the forest and is often camouflaged as well, so you can't really tell that they're there for quite a while before they sort of surprise you. And they have moss and things on their back, so they are really tricky to actually spot. So it's known as the three-toed sloth, and its key point is it moves slowly. Need another S. Moves slowly. It's camouflaged, which makes it hard to spot. So it hopefully doesn't become prey for anyone. Okay, so we've got our vegetation and we've got our animals. Now we need to think about why the Amazon rainforest is being cut down at such a fast rate. And to do this, I'm going to draw a road like that. Okay, roads are integral to development. And above the road, if you just draw 3 circles and then like that. So logging, you've probably guessed by now, is one of the main reasons that the Amazon is farmed. It's not the main reason, okay? This is all obviously to get money. It's all economic reasons. But logging is one of them, and it's one that is used around the world as well. The next one, probably less familiar with. This is supposed to be gold. Is mining. And the reason is, under the rainforest in the Amazon, and in other rainforests as well actually, is gold mining. And this is open cast mining, which, if you're not too sure about, it basically, they don't go too deep. They spread out over quite a wide area, and it causes a lot more disruption and a lot more damage. And then the next one, apologies again for my drawing, is supposed to be a cow. Oh, it's got a terrible face. Let's put some black and white spots on. I'm not even sure they are this colour actually. I'm pretty sure they're probably just brown, but anyway. Is farming, okay, cattle farming. And actually that is number 1 at the moment. So I'll put number 1 next to it. So the thing is with this is they require a lot of space to graze. So often they go hand in hand with logging, because they'll take the trees down, put the ground to grass essentially, and then farm it. And because there's no trees, the ground suffers. So actually they have to keep moving the cattle on, and it makes the soil really infertile. So if we just put that there, leaching is where the nutrients get sort of rushed out through rainfall. Because remember, the rain's still coming, but the trees aren't there to hold the ground together. So leaching from lack of tree cover, okay, makes the soil really infertile. Okay, and all of these require roads, because you have to move cattle, you have to move gold, you have to move machinery, you have to, be able to get trucks in for logging. So creating the road also creates a lot of problems. Now, there's economic, social and environmental effects that we're going to look at now. So if we just put EC here, S for social and environmental there, and we'll try and look at all of these. So for economic, first of all, what's the main reason that they do all of this? Well, it's for money, isn't it? So if we put in there income, reducing debt that they owe. Okay, and then for social, it's obviously all about people. So just draw some stick people quickly. Often in the process of this, people get moved, and it's often tribes who might have lived there for a long time. So we've got native people being moved out of where they live. The other thing is, often these native people aren't used to the kind of diseases that perhaps we carry that they haven't come across, which unfortunately, because they haven't got the health care in place, they often end up dying because they will catch something relatively low key that we're not too fussed about. We've got immunity to in our systems, like the flu. They're not used to it, and this will actually cause unnecessary deaths. So and deaths from disease. And then, of course, on the environmental impacts, it's the CO2 emissions mostly, which are increasing global warming. Because if you haven't got the trees, you haven't got the CO2 store, taking away that store, you're perhaps burning the logs, or you're causing higher rates of carbon dioxide. The other thing which we mentioned was the soil erosion without the tree cover. And then both of those together in a way, I suppose, but also a separate point, is a loss of biodiversity. One emergent tree, definitely, can provide a home to thousands of species, and it's an integral part of the ecosystem. So just cutting down even one tree can be really detrimental to that entire, ecosystem, and also to the food chain and things like that. So why do they do that? Let's look at the value of tropical rainforests, okay? And if we look at that in terms of goods and services. So on one hand, it's food, in the obvious, vegetation, animals, etc. The flowers are often in perfume. So if you go to a nice perfume shop here in the UK, it's likely that you are purchasing a perfume that has got flowers and scents from the rainforest in it. Obviously, one of the goods that you can sell as well is the timber itself. And then a big one is the rainforest contains 1/4 of all prescription medicines in the UK. So if you go to the pharmacy for your medicine, it's likely that even a basic antibiotic might well be linked to some of the plants that live there. Now, in terms of services, it's a natural carbon store. I mentioned that earlier. So trees take in carbon dioxide and they hold it in their trunk, in the timber itself. And it's crazy to think that we're trying to create ways to do that when nature does it for us. So it's a really good thing in fighting climate change. So in fact, if we just write it traps CO2 into its biomass. Okay. So there's a lot of good reasons why we want to try and protect the rainforest and not be logging it. Now, when we think about managing the rainforest, thinking about the vegetation, the animals, the reasons for logging, the value of the rainforest, there are 3 ways that I want you to think about, and I'm going to start with the best, okay? Now, I'm going to write management quickly. You could get a question just asking you about management. So, the best one, number 1, is debt reduction. Now remember, one of the main reasons we talked about for economic, was actually that they're trying to get this income to reduce debt that they owe. Many of these countries are actually struggling for money. It's not that they're chewing up the rainforest because they want to. They often don't seem to have another choice. So debt reduction is huge, okay? It's where rich countries, for example, us, so the UK or the USA, or Norway and Sweden and other countries, they cancel debt in return for carbon credit. Now, all that means is they basically make the poorer country promise to not chop down the trees, and it's all done legally, with an agreement on a certain area of land. And essentially then, it's not that the UK or the USA owns that land, it's that they are not allowing Brazil, for example, or Peru, to cut down the trees. In return, they will write off the debt that they owe, or a good proportion of it. So that is the best one. And to kind of illustrate that, I just want to do a little trophy, because that is number 1. Right, number 2 is, over here, ecotourism. Now, if you've ever been on holiday somewhere and seen a rainforest, you probably took part in ecotourism. It's wonderful. It's where you go on holiday, you visit the rainforest, you learn about the animals that are there, you take part in kind of conservation activities. It's brilliant, and it teaches people about the rainforest while at the same time making money. But the problem is it's very small scale. So if we just put there, sort of an educational holiday stroke conservation experience. Okay, so it's really good. It is bringing money in, but, and there is a but, very small scale, which is why it's not as good as debt reduction. And then number 3, our last one, is something called selective logging. Now you'll hear this talked about, and often mistakenly talked about, as if it's the best one. It's really not, though. Companies like to suggest that they're doing a really good thing by choosing which tree that they cut down. It's not the case. Okay, so if I just draw just a few trees like this. So what they do is that they will go along, they will pick the biggest, tallest tree. Often they're called wolf trees. They're quite hollow inside. They don't really contribute much to the ecosystem. And they'll go in and they'll take that tree down. And they will sell it as if they're doing this selective logging and it's great and they left all these healthy trees. But the facts are, for every 1 tree taken down, 30 trees are damaged. And not only that, but 75% of the trees in that area will be felled in 3 years. So it's actually not good at all. Okay, so I'm just going to put in there the hard facts actually, which is for every mature tree felled, what did I say? 30 trees are damaged. God, really running out of room on this one. 30 trees are damaged, and 75% of trees felled in 3 years. Okay, so that's the facts. That's what we've got to work with. So when we think about management, always think about debt reduction first. Okay, it's increasing in popularity. Think about ecotourism, and then eventually, and the very last thing to think about is selective logging. All right, I hope that helps you with your case study on the Amazon rainforest. Remember, a lot of this is applicable to other rainforests as well. And yeah, it should really help you with your exam questions.